So what's up, YouTube? It's Jason here. I'm in Battery Park, New York City, Lower Manhattan. If you can't tell, that's the Statue of Liberty right behind me through this little porthole, I guess. But just through this little window. I'm on the very edge of Battery Park. And I have something of a special video for you guys today, right? I wrote several pages. I'm going to recite them to you. This is the meaning of life according to literature. Okay, so I'm just going to read to you, and you guys can judge what you think at the end. All right, so this is a question that is pertinent to us all, obviously, the question of meaning in life, right? This is a question that is pertinent to us all, an invisible weight with enough mass. It threatens to crush us if self-reflection receives no reply. Albert Camus, in The Myth of Sisyphus, tells us, in a universe suddenly divested of illusions and lights, man feels an alien, a stranger. His exile is without remedy, since he is deprived of the memory of a lost home or the hope of a promised land. This divorce between man and his life, the actor and his setting, is properly the feeling of absurdity. All healthy men having thought of their own suicide, it can be seen without further explanation that there is a direct connection between this feeling and the longing for death. Similarly, in Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, Marmeladov tells Raskolnikov it is necessary that every man have at least somewhere to go, for every man must have at least somewhere to go. For there are times when one absolutely must go somewhere. When I was younger and experiencing a flurry of negative emotion, I often found myself repeating the phrase, I want to go home, I want to go home. But I never meant this in the literal sense. I was speaking of a distant memory, a mental refuge. A time before my parents separated, defined by love and harmony. This central fissure in my life is still visible if someone gets to know me, allowing their eyes to adjust. One tries to replicate the sensation of their lost childhood home by any means necessary, even if it comes at the cost of their own skin, right? Yet a momentary relief through vice or compulsive pleasure seeking is only that. Brief, irregular, and upon fading intensifies this longing for home with each passing go. Wounds beneath the flesh never stop agitating the heart so long as their infectious origin cannot be located, addressed, and treated. Scars will always remain, but suturing an internal laceration or blow to the spirit is necessary to prevent traumatic neuroses from cannibalizing the heart and mind. Trauma has a funny way of kicking you in the nuts a decade later when you least expect it. When comparison ignites a dormant memory of a happier time before a tragedy struck, stealing from you a sense of home, but also divorcing you from yourself. I digress, but do so for a reason. If fostering a loving home is a central part of the equation for finding meaning, then acting out trauma is the dyslexia that confuses and misguides us in our pursuit. In Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground, the underground man is a spiteful, sullen, sorry excuse of a man with bile coursing through his veins and hate saturating his heart. He is self-conscious and envies men of action who don't require a lifetime of ruminating to drive the moment to its crisis. The underground man may have an apartment, but a dirty, destitute one. Otherwise, the things we think of bringing substance to our lives, the underground man can only find contempt for, and as a result, drives away. He has no wife, no friends, no spirituality, unless you consider his notes a type of religion of the anti-human. But this just would be a type of sacrilege. And no work, since he has taken an early retirement. But what is barring him from finding such? Why is he scaring sparrows at random and only finding pleasure in the acutest awareness of his own degradation. Well, he is an orphan raised by a pack of miscreants who bullied and battered him relentlessly, seeing to it the annihilation of his confidence and dignity. So when trying to decide why the underground man is the way he is and thinks the way he does, let us not forget how W.H. Auden addresses the cause for World War II in his poem September 1st, 1939. Auden writes, "Those to whom evil is done do evil in return." Therefore, when a young prostitute named Liza comes along and the underground man remarks, "I liked her immediately. I would have hated her if she smiled," the trauma that attracts becomes the trauma that repels. He builds her up to tear her down. So when she falls and hits the ground, she doesn't receive a scrape but a lasting scar, which mirrors that of our crestfallen star. Sorry to get all, poetic, right? I cite the story of the underground man to call awareness to mental prisons we construct around ourselves. Dostoevsky's books are full of such characters who can find nothing to offset the chief point of suffering in their lives. However, this doesn't mean Dostoevsky never offers a way out. If panopticism is inspiring paranoia, alienation, and eventual madness in some, is there a way to transcend mass surveillance and the scrutinizing of every twitch, every whisper? When human cruelty and pain cloud the lens through which you see the world, how do you keep yourself from casting stones at all that disturbs you? The answer is you don't. You throw your rocks repeatedly. We all do. Even the most gentle and compassionate of us transgress from time to time. Yet an antidote to tyranny and chaos does positively exist. In the Brothers Karamazov, Alyosha, the pious, selfless lover of mankind, concludes the novel with a speech addressed to Kolya and his friends, a group of school-age boys who just finished attending the funeral of their ill classmate, Ilusha, a boy they used to torment and pick on. After imploring the boys not to forget Ilusha or one another, regardless of what life throws at them, Alyosha states, "And whatever may happen to us later in life, even if we don't meet for 20 years afterwards, let us always remember how we buried the poor boy whom we once threw stones at." Alyosha teaches us the way you rebel against the absurd is through affirmation and forgiveness. It is better to meet people where they are than to hold them to an unattainable standard. To affirm others is to forgive them of their shortcomings and to open your heart or lend out your hand to the possibility of helping them and being helped by them. In forgiving Kolya and his friends, Ilusha receives comfort and compassion in the face of death, and in turn, opening themselves up to the possibility of being forgiven by Ilusha means Kolya and his peers get to experience the transformative power of a shared sense of grief, which blossoms into love for each other and for themselves by the speech's end. "Hurrah for Karamazov," the boys exclaim in a rapture of the spirit. Hurrah for Karamazov is right, for he has illuminated the path for Kolya and others during such an impressionable time in their lives. Better to learn this lesson while youth is on your side than on your deathbed, as Tolstoy's Ivan Ilyich did. Because like him, by this point, with your strength spent and the end drawing near, your voice may falter, misconstruing the underlying message present in your final revelation. Tolstoy writes, with a glance to his wife, he pointed to his son and said, "Take away, sorry for him. And you too." He tried to say forgive, but said forgo. And too weak to correct himself, shook his hand, knowing that he would understand whose understanding mattered. The saving grace for Ivan Ilyich is that he has found grace at last and may die in the light rather than being swallowed whole by the dark. This is not to say that finding God is essential to satiate the human spirit, but rather finding forgiveness for others and oneself grants us the entrance ticket where bread is broke and the soul's supper is served. I speak so much of characters who suffer because trials and tribulations are universal and something we all must grapple with on our quest for meaning in an environment that remains indefinitely indifferent through the lifespan of our pursuit. It's easy to become nihilistic in a world ripe with personal and abstract agony because, in fact, such a viewpoint may always be justified. The reasoning that constitutes such a perspective is not unsound. However, standing on its structural pillars of skepticism and doubt for too long deprive people from finding truth and assigning value to others. Therefore, in someone who finds no intrinsic value or objective truth regarding humanity and the world, the way their beliefs influence behavior still produces an axiom. In Camus' The Myth of Sisyphus, the only serious philosophical question is whether or not to commit suicide. For Camus, confronting the absurdity of life by taking one's own only adds fuel to the fire. You don't conquer absurdity by committing an absurd act. Therefore, if we remove the mythology behind Sisyphus and look upon the arduous Therefore, if we remove the mythology behind Sisyphus and look upon the arduous act itself of pushing a boulder up a hill, watching it fall, and trudging back down to do it again, we shall not dismiss him as utterly insane, but as perhaps the wisest and most happy man ever to live. For this task embodies the rebellion against absurdity and the pursuit of meaning. You pound your fists against the ground day in and day out when trying to find love, connection, and spirituality. And at times, most definitely, your efforts will appear futile. However, you fail to realize that all your witnessing of catastrophe, your experiencing of sadness and pain, and your personal failures have been tilling the ground beneath you in order that you may cultivate a garden. In Voltaire's Candide, the eponymous protagonist is only able to recognize the old Turkish farmer's advice as wisdom because Candide and everyone around him has already endured so much. To answer the question once and for all, according to literature, to answer the question once and for all, according to literature, what is the meaning of life and how do we find it? Well, in the words of Voltaire, who clearly articulates the answer, many books have both consciously and perhaps unconsciously expressed. And in quotes, "I have 20 acres of land," replied the Turk, "which my children and I cultivate. Our work keeps us free of 3 great evils: boredom, vice, and poverty." And a little while later, after being told this and listening to Pangloss philosophize one last time about the earth being the best of all possible worlds, Candide responds and concludes the novella by stating, "Well said, but we must cultivate our garden." While the real answer must be a nuanced one, for we all have different desires, taste, and lived experience, the variables remain the same. W in the equation, the variable W represents work, and work that helps others is a positive force for good and is fully engaging and therefore rewarding. X in the equation, the variable X, or sorry, I meant times, right? So the equation is W for work times L standing for love. And obviously work, love, and finding God, that is the equation. What each one of these looks like is going to be a bit different. That's why I say it is a nuanced answer, of course, right? But L represents love, not only for others, but for ourselves. Not abstract love either, but a kind that is based on human connection and the affirming of oneself and others despite inconsistencies and imperfection. And then finally times G, and G represents finding God. Now this doesn't have to be taken in the stereotypical understanding of what it means to find God, though it most certainly can. However, in a secular society, what I mean by this is that the yearning for spirituality must be addressed rather than disregarded, because it is the positive force which balances the scale at the hour of our death. Dying with a purpose is everything, because it dictates whether one's exploration and crossing over into the unknown is cause for celebration or is a source of irrevocable grief. Of course, we all grieve over the death of our loved ones, but the type of life they lead will sway the meaning of our grief as time passes. By this equation, based on this equation, if you live a meaningful life, your memory and story can and will have a favorable impact on the living from the grave, right? The inverse of this is also true. For if you decide to spend your days lambasting and tyrannizing others, your memory remains to torture the living well past the point of decomposition, right? So if you live a life in the light and a meaningful one, even after you pass away, your story and your memory goes on to have a positive impact on people. But then I say the inverse of that is also true. If you lambast people, if you insult people during your time alive, if you're spiteful and a no good, nasty person, your memory and story, your infamy, goes on to cause hurt and pain from the grave, right? And the thing is, the nice part about that is we get to write the story. We get to choose whether we search for meaning or not. And not all of us, sure, will give up before we find it. And you may find it in moments, and other moments you may not. So that's the thing. It's not a constant either. Once you have found it, you have to work to maintain it. But that concludes it, right? So just all the works that I referenced in this video: W.H. Auden's poem, September 1st, 1939, Albert Camus' The Myth of Sisyphus, of course, Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground, and Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov, and then Leo Tolstoy's The Death of Ivan Ilyich, and Voltaire's Candide. So yes, this has been me, Jason, coming to you from Battery Park with the Statue of Liberty right behind me, where people used to come in, or I guess this represented something, right? That statue did, coming in through Ellis Island and chasing the American dream. Well, I'm not sure if that's dead or not, but we're certainly out here chasing something as I travel to and from this city. So yes, thank you, and more videos to come.